Well, the day has arrived. I'm not excited about a Star Wars movie. Personally, I never thought this day would come, but here we are. So, since we're going to be getting Star Wars movies until we all die, Disney has to throw some variety in there, which is why we're not just getting the saga films, but a whole bunch of spin-offs as well, like Rogue One. Not only that, but Rogue One was a big hit, so these spin-offs aren't just possible, they're profitable, so they're not going to stop. Now, I won't pretend that Star Wars is a franchise built solely on artistic merit at this point. Star Wars exists to make money, and Disney's running a business, they have to keep the brand alive. And there's certainly some potential with these spin-offs, but I have a few problems with the next Star Wars story we're getting, which will follow the adventures of a young Han Solo. Now, I'm never going to really complain about more Star Wars, because Star Wars has meant so much to me for so long, but I've had my doubts about this movie from the very beginning, primarily because I believe that the purpose of these spin-offs should be to do something new. Rogue One tied right into A New Hope, but at least it tried to do something new, and the story was built around characters and locations that we hadn't seen before in a Star Wars movie. And now the next spin-off is telling the story of a young version of Han Solo. Not exactly moving in a new direction there. I know the movie will be filled with new characters, new locations, new alien designs, etc., but the characters at the center of the film are still going to be Han Solo and Chewbacca, and that's just not new. Okay, before we get into the negative aspects of this movie, let's be fair and talk about the positives. The creative team behind this movie is very strong, especially Phil Lord and Chris Miller in the directing chairs, because that team has only yielded great results so far. Lawrence Kasdan wrote the screenplay, and if anyone can deliver quality Star Wars scripts, it's him. And obviously, the most important aspect of a Han Solo movie is Han Solo himself, and I think they have a pretty solid actor taking on that role in Alden Ehrenreich. I've only seen him in Hail Caesar, but he was pretty fantastic in that movie, and if he can bring that same charming energy to his iteration of Han Solo, it'll probably be a good performance at the very least. But the performance itself is an issue, because Han Solo is a character who's very much defined by the actor who brought him to life in the first place. Han Solo isn't a legacy character like James Bond or Doctor Who. Harrison Ford played him from his first appearance in the franchise to the last. The character has appeared in other Star Wars media, but the majority of those appearances have been in books, where the image of Harrison Ford can still exist in the reader's mind. It's hard to avoid the fact that Ehrenreich might look like someone dressing up like Han Solo and pretending to be Han Solo, but not really feeling like Han Solo, and that's not Ehrenreich's fault. That would happen with any actor who would take on this role. That possible disconnect with the physical appearance of Han is a direct result of the fact that we're moving so far back in the character's history. I'm not writing this movie off because someone else is playing Han Solo. That would be ridiculous. The real root of my issues with this spin-off is that it feels like Han Solo's story is done. Across the saga, we've seen his full arc. He went from a smuggler, a scoundrel, and a loner to a war hero and one of the primary figures who freed the galaxy from the Empire, to an old man who tried to escape the realities of his life and whose hope and belief in goodness ultimately led to his death. That's a great character arc to follow, and the fact that Harrison Ford was there from beginning to end and was so committed to the character to the very end makes it feel complete. And what I've always liked about Han Solo's arc isn't where it ends, but rather where it begins. Han Solo never got a full, definitive origin story, even in the prequels. That's a large part of what made the original Star Wars trilogy feel so special, the lack of specifics around characters and events. There were little references to things like the Clone Wars, which were intriguing when we didn't get the full picture, and in the case of the Clone Wars, the full picture was pretty uninteresting. As far as the Star Wars saga is concerned, Han Solo's story begins when Luke and Obi-Wan meet him in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and it ends when well, when his life ends. The biggest flaw with the idea of Star Wars spin-offs to me is that the mystery is being dispelled. I can imagine what Han Solo's adventures prior to A New Hope might be, but whatever the canonical adventures end up being will likely be a disappointment compared to what I can imagine. I'm not saying that my imaginary Han Solo adventures are any better than what will be in this upcoming movie, but the mystery and ambiguity around them will be gone. Take Rogue One, for example. We never knew how the rebels got the Death Star plans, and it turns out that a bunch of boring people pointed a satellite at the sky and flipped a switch. 10 out of 10. So, while there is a story to be told with Han Solo before A New Hope, it's not a story that really needs to be told, and on a personal level, it's not a story that I have any interest in. And I know that doesn't mean anything to Lucasfilm, because they'll make $1 billion either way, but Han Solo's story, as far as I'm concerned, is done. Maybe it's because Han Solo's death was so impactful to me, you know, such an emotional moment in the theater. It just feels strange to bring his character back to the forefront of the franchise so soon after that. Star Wars doesn't really need to bring in Han Solo for the sake of marketing, right? I mean, a Star Wars movie will be profitable regardless of who's on the poster. People think that Jyn Erso is a good character. They'll accept anything. So far, the new Star Wars films have been sticking a bit too close to the characters and story elements of the original trilogy, and personally, I've had my fill of Star Wars nostalgia. I want to see the franchise move in new directions, and the young Han Solo movie just feels like a big step backwards. At the end of the day, I am going to approach this movie with an open mind, because it's not like I want it to be bad. I have faith in the writers, directors, and the frankly fantastic cast to deliver a movie that is at least passable, but this film just seems like an unexciting direction to take the Star Wars franchise in. I want Disney to just forget about this idea and move on. As far as I'm concerned, Han Solo's story is done, and there isn't any more that needs to be told, even if there is technically more to tell. If Harrison Ford hadn't come back for The Force Awakens, then maybe I would have some desire to see Han Solo again, but after such a definitive ending to his character, there's no need to go back. And while I am open to the idea of these spin-offs, they still feel somewhat unnecessary, and unless the Han Solo movie somehow tanks at the box office, they're just gonna keep on coming. And then we'll all probably have to sit through a Boba Fett movie. What a compelling protagonist he'll be.